Then I'm going to need you to click in a minute because I couldn't find my clicker. Welcome, everyone. I am Pastor Sara McManus, and we are here tonight at Flame of Faith United Methodist Church for our second Neurodiversity and Faith event. We're asking the question, how do our brains affect our understanding of God? We're going to tell this through our own stories and share together. To start us off, this is an event speaking to the lived experience of those who are neurodivergent. So I hope you know that you are free to exist however you are most comfortable. Here at Flame of Faith, and especially tonight, if you need to move around, move around. If you need fidgets or a blanket or noise dampening headphones or a wobble seat or, gosh, I don't even know all else. We have coloring books, all of the things. What do you need? The weighted lap pads, yes, those are really helpful as well. All of those are in the hallway. We also have a calming space back down this hallway, and I have forgotten to get the stream up in there, so that's not available tonight, but if you get overwhelmed and you need a space to calm down, it is back there. But tonight's topic, as I said, is on how our brains connect us to God in different ways. Yeah? Can you turn my mic up? The wireless. Is this better? It's okay. Can everyone hear me? Okay. I apologize. No, that is a great interruption. Thank you, Joan. So one of the things that is important to know, we are not here to answer any questions about neuroscience or psychotherapy. We are not that smart. Well, they might be that smart, but that's not their area of focus. So we are here to tell stories about who we are and how we connect to God. This year's topic was inspired by a webinar shared by the Center for Autism and Theology at the University of Aberdeen, not in South Dakota, but in the United Kingdom. And the speaker, Stuart Rapley, is an autistic person who was researching autistic engagement and connection in the churches that he was connected with in the UK. His research shared some common themes about autistic thinking and God. And so now we all know that generalizations only go so far, but it can be a helpful beginning. So I'm going to let him share, and I'm going to start our video.
So first of all, we talked about concept of God, thinking about God, and the way in which the church talks about and presents God and the way in which congregations typically think about God is very much around a person. So we talk about persons of the Trinity. There was some functional MRI scan research done that indicated that neurotypical people, when they talked about God and prayed, activated areas of their brains that had to do with relating to other people. And so that whole idea that God is, as it were, another person, a being. The autistic people, those parts of the brain didn't light up, or not so much. And what I found was people generally had some difficulty with this concept and tended to prefer to think of God in non-anthropomorphic terms, so not as a person, but perhaps more as a force, a spirit, or something like the source of all being. If you think then of God as a person, it makes sense to think of prayer perhaps as talking to God, having a conversation with God and a relationship with God, and so on. If, as many autistic people may do, you think that's a bit odd, then the idea of prayer as talking to God doesn't make any sense. And so the theme started to emerge then of thinking about prayer as simply being with or in God rather than talking to God.
So Rapley's research, it goes on. This is an hour-and-a-half webinar. I found the juiciest bits. His research that the very concepts of God are affected by the way our brains function is yet another area in which we understand God to be bigger than we know. And so our speakers tonight will share their own connections to God and how their own neurodivergence affects their connection. So our first speaker Josh Russiff, I'm going to invite him forward. He's a young man from our congregation. He grew up in this church and is now, and I delight in this, standing confident in who he is in connection to both God and to the community around him. Josh, I invite you to come forward. I forgot to ask you which microphone you want to use. Do you want to use this one or that one? Okay, perfect.
Can everybody hear me? I can talk a little louder. I do apologize. My voice is very soft. Hello, everyone. As you've heard from Pastor Sara, my name is Josh Russiff. My brain sees things differently than the majority of people. I have a history with the brain. Until this year, I had no idea what neurodiversity was or even is, so I looked it up. Neurodiversity is defined as a unique way to explain how people's brains work. For me, this word in its other form, neurodivergent, categorizes me. Trust me, I've had the test done. When I was invited to speak at this event, it made me think, how could I talk about this? I could talk about this. However, while beginning to write it, I kind of asked myself, what? So looking back, I think it started when Pastor Sara, back in my youth group days, when I learned it a little bit differently than the rest of the people in the group. Pastor Sara and I had a discussion the other day about how she learned a lot about the brain from just watching my brother and I grow up in the church. We are a complete opposite in how we interact with everybody and God. My younger brother would like to challenge Pastor Sara intellectually by asking questions that she did not always have the answers for. I was a little more rambunctious. Pastor Sara met me during my angsty teen years, and there was a lot that I did not appreciate in the decisions that were being made regarding my future. However, during that time, I was not aware of what was going on. Now, I'm not entirely sure that I know everything said behind closed doors, but I'm fairly sure my parents and Pastor Sara had a multitude of interesting conversations regarding me. Hopefully, seeing things through my eyes will shed a little light on how my brain interacts with the world around me. We can easily start where I think things started to get hard. In June of 2017, after I graduated high school, I had the world to look forward to. My father had a seizure at work, later presenting itself as a brain tumor. Looking at this now, I felt that this was a test of mine and my family's faith. I vividly recalled that I was blamed for a lot because of my father's cancer made him look at me like the bad guy. I was always in the wrong, no matter what I did. During this time, I felt that my father wanted nothing to do with me. However, I knew that this was the cancer talking and not him. Over the course of those months, we did a lot together as a family. In July, he was diagnosed with an astrocytoma. My mother and father connected with one of the doctors at Duke University through one of my mother's cousins because of a drug that my father was on. She had done the clinical trial prior to 10, 20 years, something like that prior to, and it worked for her. While they went to appointments, the list of responsibilities grew at home. The one thing my parents had agreed on was to take a less invasive route and try to keep everything as normal for my siblings because they were still in high school, and we're already at one of their most vulnerable developmental stages. Basically, they didn't want everyone to look at them like, oh, their dad has cancer, we should pity them. Treatment started as soon as they had returned. Continued through August and September. My siblings returned to school. I made an attempt at a community college. Our lives attempted to continue as normal as we could make them out to be. I do remember, or maybe this was a dream, I'm still not sure to this day. At this point, there was a point where it came to a front. It was hard to tell during that time because I felt like I was the only person that had to deal with this. I had come to church to attend a service one day and stayed to ask Pastor Sara a question along the lines of, why me? Why did I have to see the changes in my dad's mood around me and no one else was making a big deal out of it? I wanted answers. She said, that she was trying to make sense of it herself, and the only way I could get them was to pray. So pray I did. Fast forward a few months, in October, after all of my siblings' fall activities finished up, my family gathered in the living room. My mother said that we were going to go to Raleigh, Durham, to visit Duke University for my dad's final appointment because the treatments were working. I just remember in the room going over the results and my brother asking the question that we were all thinking at the moment. Was it gone? Well, the tumor had stopped getting bigger. However, we never got answers on the cancer. But for my family, we knew that that was not how God does things. When we returned, we entered the winter months in North Dakota, and everybody knows they can be pretty brutal. In November of 2017, it was exceptionally tough for my family because we had just learned that the tumor had stopped. My dad had started to regain his strength. However, he was not meeting the requirements and was requiring longer and longer stays in the hospital. Come Thanksgiving, he was in long-term care due to an infection that was not getting better. December was visits to the hospital in our free time, school, and activities. Christmas was spent by my dad's bedside celebrating with family and friends. On January 2nd of the new year, we had hospice care come and convert my brother's bedroom into something my dad could be comfortable in. In February, he passed in his sleep. Until recently, I looked at the world in ones and zeros, because computers came easy. I didn't always see people as people. Now, that statement might sound, the next statement must sound pretty cold, but during this time, I didn't really see as humans with emotions. I saw them as things that I could use to get me to the next point in my life. I had lost my path. I felt like the world owed me something. I was lost. I needed something to set me on the right path. So I was doing a little search on the internet and found what they call Job Corps. Job Corps is a government-funded program by the Department of Jobs, I believe. I went to a place called Guthrie, Oklahoma. I tried to find out who I was as a person. I did find a style of music that I really enjoy. It definitely helped me study. So, I was able to develop good friendships that are long-lasting. My roommate is actually from the same program that I went through, and he and I have had some growing pains, as all roommates do. It also taught me that helping people and taking on a challenge of giving back, similar to what my mother and father did for all three of their kids. I wanted to be a part of something greater, of that greater plan for myself that God had for me. My mom had been a nurse for 30 years. My dad worked as a snowplow operator / mechanic for Cass County government in their vector control. My brother is currently working at Bobcat in their product design department as an engineering student through NRSV. And who knows, he may help someone somewhere with something that he created. My sister, currently in her first year of college, with plans to be an oncologist or anesthesiologist. It's kind of still up in the air to her, I think. She definitely has some searching left to do, though. However, whatever plans, she knows that her family will always be there to support her decision. Me, well, I'm standing here giving the speech in the spotlight, and not someplace I'm particularly known to be. Recently, I gave a sermon, kind of out of the blue, definitely out of my comfort zone. It kind of surprised, on Philip the Apostle, kind of surprised my mother and pastor and my little sister. I had not really felt the need to want to be in the front of the camera willingly. It's been that way since high school. Never liked being in front of them. I got that from my father. He wanted to be in name only, and sometimes he didn't even want his name on something. While writing the sermon, I found that I see something similar to Philip, kind of a linear versus or in a logical way. He was told to follow, stepped up to the challenge, and followed Jesus blindly, and it took him places that not many people wanted to go. I took it upon myself to accept the challenge of sharing a talent with the congregation that I most definitely do better in smaller settings. Now, I was given an outline of what verses I could use and texts that I could reference, with a little help of a resource that not many people can think of, which was AI, artificial intelligence. A computer program, because my grammar's not the best. I was able to better summarize Philip's story properly, and I was able to then relate the events in Philip's life to the events that I experienced in my life. Now, you see how I came to this point. My life was going well, but that's not always what God plans. God's plan is. He throws tough situations at you and tests you to ensure that you're able to go out on top. He wants to break you down and slowly pick up the pieces you have left. Sometimes he doesn't have all the pieces. But by seeing the mistakes that you've made, or that I have made, he reshaped them into something that I can learn from and move on. Even if you don't take anything from this long, lengthy speech that I wrote, I want you to leave with the song lyrics to one of my favorite songs out there in the world. Something that reminds me of the memories that I've made with the people I love, and how I feel that God and I interact day to day through my environment. Now, the song is about, the song is by a girl group that I am very fond of called Twice. Twice is one of the biggest girl groups in the world. They're made up of 9 members. If you were to ask me the name of them, I could point them out because their features are all very distinct. But the lyrics to this song are, "The memory that was pounding my heart is now gone. My memories are like the moon. They make me smile today. Through this, like the sun and the moon in the sky, although we can't meet like them, don't forget that we'll all be together after dark. If you look at the sky like the moon in the daytime, I will always be by your side. You're still shining in this sky that I think of. Do you think about me now? It makes me cry. If I just lay still and close my eyes, the seasons we've been together will come back to me. It feels like they'll hug me. Even if night and day passes, even if time passes, remember that I will always be by your side. I eagerly waited for it. We'll meet someday, like a dream that I don't want to wake up from after dark. If you look at the sky like the moon in the daytime, I will always be there. I will always be by your side. I will always be there. Thank you." The song is called After Moon, so it is a very beautiful song.
Thank you, Josh. Someday he'll forgive me for keep calling him up front these days. Our next speaker today is a friend of mine and a co-director of our United Methodist Church camp in Daisy, North Dakota, Wesley Acres Camp. The children in the room might be excited. His energy and wisdom often inspire me to learn more and to grow kinder every day. And so I invite Reverend Paul Lint to come forward and to tell us his story.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I am Paul Lint, and I do get to call myself Reverend when I want to, but I also get to call myself Camp Director, which is so awesome. So first I want to start with, I just watched Twice yesterday. They were on my Samsung TV. My daughter, it was awesome. Anyway, so Twice, those ladies can dance. Anyway, now you know me. All right. So I want to tell a little bit about where I come from and why maybe my brain works different, more differently. I'm a rebel. My whole life has been, if somebody tells me to do something, I do the opposite, or somebody tells me I can't do something, I'm going to make sure I do it, is sort of who I've been. And so that's sort of framed, I've trained my brain that way. And then on top of that, I am very empathetic. Now, that's going to seem very strange because you'll have to wait till see the next person. But I also am somewhat empathetic. I'm very extroverted. And I have no bubble. Right? So if I knew you and you walked in today, I probably gave you a hug. The reality is, though, that I also have never medicated ADHD. That's another reality of how my brain works. And my dad, who is an amazing man, amazingly wonderful man, decided that medication would change who I was as a person, so he wouldn't let me have it. And in some ways, I really am grateful for who my dad was and who my dad was in that way, and I have no idea who I would be had there been a different path, right? Had there been, had I gone through some medication and things like that. I made it through school. Some of the challenges that other people with ADHD have, I made it through those things. So I'll take it. Whatever it is, this is who I am. This is who you get. And so one of the ways that that all those things that I mentioned help me to relate to God differently is that I am not linear. I am not linear. My journey with God is very filled with tangents, filled with those little offshoots that you get to go check out a different part of what God's doing in the world, and a new opportunity, a new experience that maybe I wouldn't take if I was on a clear path that direction. I have to go that way, then I might not see the world and do the things that I've done. Right? And I might not experience the world the way that I've experienced it. And I felt like my dad, who again, my dad's going to comes to be a very big part in this story, because while my dad refused to give me medication and refused to seek that route, he also had infinite patience with the craziness that I was being with Paul Lint, right? I mean, my dad would get up at 5 a.m. to do a sermon, and by 5:30 I'd be sitting at his chair asking him 1,000 questions, right? We'd go on trips together, and everybody else would be sleeping in the van, and I'd be sitting in the passenger seat, and my dad would be throwing geometry questions at me because he wanted me to think and not just talk all the time. I was like 7, and he's asking me how many shingles would go on this roof, and he's telling me the dimensions, right? Because he wanted me to engage that part of my brain and to try to also give him a little bit of a break for his ears, right? Right? But my dad, instead of saying, you can't be who you are, my dad said, okay, this is who you are. How are you going to use that? I feel like that's my relationship with God. My relationship with God is very much, God sees the weirdness that we are. God sees the uniqueness that we are, the neurodivergent, the neuro whatever that we are, and goes, okay, awesome. I did good with that one. Let's try something different. Let's do something different with this one, right? And so my experience is that that's who God is for everyone. So I have this engagement with the rest of the world around me as, okay, so you're a little bit different. Cool. How's God going to use you differently? Oh, you saw that same thing that I did a little bit differently than I see it. How does that make that more real for everyone? How does that make that more clear for everybody else? Right? One of my professors in seminary told me that when we're talking about theology, right? If we're talking about how do we talk about God correctly or authentically, he said the most authentic way, or the most honest way to talk about God is to talk to God. So the best theology is liturgy, right? The ways that we worship reflect the way that we relate to God. Right? The way that we worship, what we say to God is what we think about God, right? And so for me, as you've already noticed, that idea of a community is very important, right? Worshiping by myself, okay, it's all right. But worshiping in community, worshiping and hearing other people's voices, literally hearing harmonies, hearing somebody play the flute, hearing somebody play the guitar or a banjo in worship, or even a saxophone, right? Hearing that different voice in worship, that's important to the way I relate to God, right? So when I think about the most honest connections I have with God, and I try to relate that within the context of being a clergy person, being a pastor, it's about helping other people find their voice when they're speaking about God. Because our theology is better when we hear everybody else's voices. Our theology is better when we hear how others see and experience God in their lives. When other people reflect on what they're hearing from God in a way that I would never have reflected. Right? We're so much better off. And so my ADHD brain loves it to have somebody respond to me in worship. I'm talking, and somebody responds to me in worship. I'm like, yeah, let's talk about that for a while. Right? Love that. That's it's so perfect because now that person's voice mattered, right? That person or somebody, a little guy comes up to the comes up to children's time and starts talking about something and then I bring that back into the sermon. Because those connections are important to me. The connection between what that child is experiencing in worship is important to who God is. Not just how I experience God, but who God really is. God really is because that boy asked me about why Oreos have white stuff in the middle, right? It really does it has a meaning. And so I try to find those connections all the time. And even when like Pastor Peggy's or Pastor Sara are preaching up front, those connections are happening for me constantly. What shared experience do I have? What reality do I have or what movie did I just see? Or those connections are happening for me all the time, those flashes. And some people might say, well, you're distracted. Well, yes. Yep. And yet that's how God works on me. That's how I work with God, right? Like my brain is constantly tracking different ways, like 4 different lanes of traffic, right? And it's wonderful because we're still moving all together forward. But maybe I now have a way I can connect with my friend who I also watched that movie. Or I can stop in the middle of worship. Listen to this. In the middle of worship, stop and write a social media post about what we're talking about. Right? Because then other people who have that same connection, that saw that same connection or experienced that same connection, see God in a new way. Experience God fully in a more full way. Right? So that, for me, it has to be authentic. My relationship with God has to be authentic. You guys don't get anything, polished, right? I mean, even my notes are handwritten chicken scratch because it's about the authentic, not about my polished. I have a really hard time. Those people have typed out notes. I would have to just read it to you. I would be like, stuck, right? I would have to just read it to you. But now I can share with you that who is God? God's relational. God's a relationship with me and God, right? The person that talked before about that's me, right? He talked about how a lot of people in church talk about how God is a friend. Well, God, it's about a relationship between people, and it's about a relationship between people and a relationship between people and God, right? I know I draw circles, but that's okay. We still get there. So God, that's who God is. God is connection and God is relation, and so. That's who God is for me, because that's how my brain works. Okay.
We're going to have a moment after our last speaker in which you can ask some questions of our speakers. I haven't asked all 3 of them yet, so I don't know if all 3 of them will answer questions, but at least 2 will. Our final speaker tonight is a pastor in Madison, South Dakota. And she will disagree with this. However, I just spent a weekend watching this happen. She ran our youth event this weekend. And so I say her organizational skills, encouragement, and daily prayer inspire and connect not only myself, but many other. I know there are a lot of us pastors who receive prayer and encouragement from her on a regular basis, but I know she connects with those outside of our little group as well on a regular basis. So I want to invite forward Reverend Peggy Hanson.
I think I did this right. Yeah, I'm on, right? Am I on? Yeah. Cool. So fun fact, I'm going to steal this music stand. Paul and I have a lot in common while also being drastically different, because where Paul is a rebel, I need structure and organization. Paul and I are both empaths. We express it in different directions, but I've learned that I need the structure as an ADHD person. Otherwise, I would be in 15 different directions at once, but I wouldn't be able to focus on one. You can focus on all 4. I see all 4, and I start to shut down. So I need to hold in to that one every once in a while, because all my life, I never felt like I fit in. The way that I experienced life was different, the way that I saw the world, the way that I would make connections with movies and music, and could do that so fast, no one else could do it. And they just said, well, you're weird. Or they would say, oh, you're just in Peggy's world. That's literally what it was called. When I was a young adult, I actually met up with another pastor who hung out with us when we were little. And she said, no, I'd watch you. You would literally go into Peggy's world. You would be fully present, but whenever something was happening that was out of your control or was just too overwhelming, you like disappeared. And it was like Bobby's World. I don't know if you ever watched that TV show where he would ride on his three-wheel. I would just disappear into there. All my life, I felt like I was supposed to fit in a box. And it was never a comfortable box. So I'd try and fit in a box, and I'd struggle with that. And it was uncomfortable. Like, this dude does not look comfortable in any way, shape, or form. In fact, the next picture is very appropriate to what I felt like. That cat does not look pleased of the if I fits, I sits. But that's how it was. And then there was middle school. I don't know how many middle schoolers we have, folks that will either experience or those who went through middle school. It's an awkward time. Can we all agree with that? Middle school is hard. There is a special place for middle school teachers. I love them. I love my middle school students. I hang out with them for an hour and a half to 2 hours on a Wednesday night, and I'm done. I don't know how people do this for like 8 hours a day. But when I was in middle school and going through all of the changes, the expectation started to change. Not only externally of all the things that we had to do, but also internally. And I found it more challenging to concentrate, and my brain would jump around. And so I would doodle, because this is before we had fidgets or anything else where we were allowed to occupy our brains. I got through seminary by playing Bejeweled Blitz on my computer, because I was allowed to have a laptop. That was like before Candy Crush. It was that kind of a game. So I would doodle. I'm going to ask Sara to show the next picture. So it's hard to tell, but you can kind of see mountains. Underneath that is part of the Psalm 121, and it was also a song that we would sing at camp. So I would draw these pictures and then write song lyrics on it, because I constantly have a song going through my head. It is one giant musical in here, and it is sometimes so hard to not break out into song. I love when I am around my people, because we're able to. Like at the youth event, we're like, all right, let's get down to business. And a group of us, to defeat the Huns. Like, we just instantly started. Please tell me I'm not alone. Thanks, Paul. And these are camp songs. Camp was a huge pivotal time in my life. It not only helped me to grow as a person, to grow in my faith, but it helped me to actually start to understand my brain. At camp, I learned about who I got to be and who I wanted to be. But I also got to experience my call into the ministry. Camp has been very pivotal in my life. And actually, while in middle school, I was attending a winter camp, and there was a movie night that we got to have. And we watched a movie called Angus. Has anyone heard of this movie? Yes, thank you. Sorry, I got really excited. This movie is about an awkward teenager. He is trying to figure out his life. He is trying to figure out who he is. He has to wear this like hideously awesome purple tuxedo thing. But at some point in the movie, there's this conversation about what is normal. And he realizes there is no normal. Normal is a construct. Other people get to define what normal is, and why should normal get to define him? And that movie was like, it blew my mind, because for the first time, I realized I don't need to be like everyone else's normal. I could be me. That could be my normal, and we can work together, and that might not be for everyone's flavor. That's fine. But we could find those ways to get that, because no one gets to define my normal for me. So I began to grow and break out of all of those boxes that people tried to put me in, and I built my own in weird, fun shapes, because that's just who I am. And as a youth and a young adult, my friends and I would joke about ADHD. I don't know if you've ever heard of the ADOS joke. I have attention deficit. Ooh, shiny. This is my daily life. It's very important I get this done. Squirrel! Like, constantly. I have tons of different rabbit trails, and I want to follow all of them, but I can't. And part of the struggle was, especially for folks that are my age, girls weren't ADHD. We were told we weren't ADHD. There's no way we could be. So many of us are getting diagnosed later in life and have learned coping skills and structures to help us. The reason I am so organized for that event is because in order to know that everything would be accomplished, I literally had to-do lists that were color-coded and like, okay, let's walk through the day so that I could then tell someone, because part of ADHD is anxiety. I had no idea about this until a few years ago when I started working with a counselor, and they said, you know, ADHD and anxiety often go hand in hand, especially for women. And I went, no, I don't have anxiety. It's funny now. Because to me, the only times I had seen anxiety expressed was the type of anxiety that shut you down. The kind of anxiety that made you not be able to leave a space, that almost felt like it held you captive at times. And I'm like, that's not me. No, I have the complete opposite. I have high-functioning anxiety that actually revs me up. So the more anxious I am, the more tasks I need to do, and the faster I start talking and all of those things that people tell me to breathe. We actually have a code word at camp, and it's Hufflepuff. For my Harry Potter fans, they just look, because you laugh when you hear Hufflepuff, and it would cause me to breathe and realize that I had gone into the too anxious part, and I needed to pull back. Because in my anxiousness, unintentionally, I started micromanaging. And that's not helpful. So then, as I continued to live into this and figure this all out, I learned some of those breathing techniques. I love that sticker you gave me that I think is available here. It's like a square breath prayer. If you've never done that, I highly recommend it. I started exercising, pay attention to what I eat, because too much sugar, or there's this fine balance between caffeine where I need some because that actually helps. But if I go too far, I start to be able to taste colors, and that's not helpful for anyone. So I learned how to adapt. I learned how to do what I needed to do to be able to function as a human being. But there was a part that always seemed to keep lacking, and that was the faith side. Because as much as I had learned how to adapt and understand normal isn't normal in life, in faith that didn't add up for me. Because my question is, what makes a good Christian? No, like really, what's a mark of a good Christian? What do good Christians do, friends? This is you get to engage with me time. They follow. What else? Help your neighbor. What else do they do as daily tasks are we supposed to do as Christians? Pray. Read your Bible. Anything else? Be kind. Absolutely. These are all fantastic things. And I understood the love your neighbor part. I was like, yep, I can do that. I can be kind. I can follow. I can do this. That's great. But I'm supposed to learn, and I'm supposed to grow. So especially as becoming a pastor, well, what are your disciplines? ADHD and disciplines. How often are you reading your Bible? I do like to read it, but okay. And then it's like daily devotionals. I have a love-hate relationship with them because there's so much good stuff, but often I catch myself of this is my daily checklist. And the only reason that I'm able to hold on to it and keep that habit is because I get to share prayers with others. I use social media to, one, hold me accountable, but two, to remind me that it's not just about me, because this is how I love my neighbor, is by praying for my neighbor. And I started to learn through ADHD, it's not the structure or the disciplines that are important about fasting and praying. Those are very important, absolutely. But it might look differently for me. That maybe I genuinely need to fast from a computer screen. And I need to go walk in creation to abide in God's presence, to remember why I do what I do. And including prayer walking. Or while I'm exercising and being angry that my body may not be able to do what I want it to do, but thanking God that I can do what I could do at that moment. And finding those ways to start to weave it throughout my entire life and through my day, because I used to think there was only one pathway. That we as followers of Jesus, we have one pathway. And you might have pit stops on the way or different shepherds, and we're all in the same pathway, just at different spots on it, right? And we might just have to pause or rest. That's a pretty walk. It might curve a little somewhere beyond, we don't know. But here's how my pathway is. And it's similar to what, this is me. It's all gonna get to the same direction, but I like to jump. I need to be able to like hop, skip, and a jump to the other different routes. Because if I stay on one too long, I get bored. Or I start to disconnect because it starts to become obligation, then connection. It starts to become obligation instead of relational. And I started to think about what this means as a person and a person of faith, of connecting through art and nature, sacred conversations, even when you're just catching up with a friend or a loved one. There can be some really holy work in there. God didn't create us all to be carbon copies. What works for one doesn't necessarily work for another. God created each person with a hope and a purpose. And one of my favorite scriptures is Psalm 139, verses 13 and 14. And I know that's kind of small print because I wanted you to see two different verses of it, or two different versions, translations. So I'm just going to share. The first one is the Common English Bible. You, God, are the one who created my innermost parts. You knit me together while I was still in my mother's womb. I give thanks to you that I am marvelously set apart. Your works are wonderful. I know that very well. And then from the New Revised Standard Version, updated edition. For it was you who formed my inward parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works that I know very well. God made me. God made each of us unique, beautiful, wonderful creations with a hope and a purpose. And that we're not supposed to try and fit in to other people's boxes. We're meant to embrace our neurodivergency or neural normacy, neurosparkly, however we view the world. We're meant to embrace that. Romans 12:2 says, don't be conformed to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind so that you can figure out what God's will is, what is good and pleasing and mature. Friends, we need to stop trying to be like everyone else and fit in those boxes and just embrace ourselves. Each summer, I have a privilege of leading an older elementary camp at Storm Mountain Center, and it's called The Next Normal, where we encourage those 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders to not conform to the patterns of this world, but to embrace themselves to be who God created them to be, fearfully and wonderfully made, set apart as God's chosen people, these beloved human beings that is before they hit that really awkward part, they may hit that foundation to know this, that we have been given these different gifts and graces to explore and experience the world. To me, ADHD has become a gift. Yes, there have been times I have done harm. I will own that. It hasn't always been a perfect thing and still isn't. But it's allowed me to connect, to see the world in a whole different way. And it's helped me to share my story as well. It's like suddenly getting that right prescription when you get your glasses renewed or updated, and everything suddenly comes into focus. That's what it's like for me. God doesn't make mistakes. God created us beautifully and differently, not in a bad way, but in God's beautiful mosaic that we get to be part of. So friends, let's continue to embrace all of the spectrum of life, of mental capacities, because each of us have been made beautifully and wonderful with a hope and a purpose. Thank you.
Thank you, Peggy. I would invite you to stay up here. I'm going to ask Paul to come up and Josh, do you want to participate? All right, you can come on up. Y'all are welcome to grab chairs if you want. You will look more important if you're sitting. Yes, that is true. So now we have a time of, if you have any questions for any of our speakers tonight, there we go. Yeah, that's because he's cooler than you. Anybody have any questions for our group tonight? One of my questions would be, is there a time when somebody else has been explaining God at some point where you were just like, I cannot understand that? Every Wednesday.
Every Wednesday?
Okay, you're going to have to explain why.
Well, usually I participate on my phone. I sometimes will, focus on something, but I know that you're speaking.
Okay.
And a lot of the times, it's really hard to understand how your outlook on God can relate back to me.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
Okay.
All right. Now I want to know how I can make that better. I can't. Okay. I cannot translate. That's fair. I have a different brain. I try, but I can't. How about you two?
I really struggle, and again, you got to remember that my pattern is conversational, right? And so when I'm sitting back there, sometimes it becomes conversational. So if the person up here says something that I don't understand, they might hear that I don't understand, like, what? From the back. It doesn't matter. But I really struggle anytime someone claims that God, it is very clear what God says. Anytime somebody says that, oh, it's obvious what God says about this. I'm like, what? Like, no, it's not. I think those are the times when it's a clear black and white or very clear God is in this box. I really struggle with those moments.
I would agree with that. It's those moments, and I'll be honest, there are certain times that even when reading scripture and understanding who God is, I don't always quite grasp it. John 1, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God, and some of that will get lost to me because it's almost too abstract that I need the structure to build off of. So it's either when it's too abstract or too structured. I need that balance between that I lose sight of who God is as someone's explaining it.
I find it interesting. So none of our speakers tonight have autism. And so our video at the beginning spoke about a particular trait of most autistic thinkers of everything needing to be black and white, and having, a lot of you talked about that, that relational connection to God, and how that can be different for other people who want to have more of a kind of big picture or presence connection. So I found that interesting tonight, listening, having heard that, and then coming in and listening to you all and going, this is the exact opposite. Because obviously everyone is different, but also within what we understand to be neurodiversity, neurodivergence. So neurotypical people, to explain our phrasing, neurotypical people are like the majority of brains. I'm a neurotypical person, and so my brain tends to work in that fashion. And then neurodivergent people, or neurosparkly, which is Peggy's new favorite way to,
It's her term.
I found it on TikTok. Neurosparkly is a way of saying that we're different than kind of typical, but not necessarily in all the same way. One phrase used in the autistic community a lot is, if you've met an autistic person, you have met one autistic person. Mm-hmm. And so even in our difference, there is incredible difference. It's not just one group and another. So that's interesting to me.
Yeah, I would say that actually in one reality for me, my relationship with God has developed into I really, there's one totally out there, weird, enigmatic way of seeing God that really works for me. And that God is conversation, or God is the dance, that activity of dancing and moving around, and that movement of God, that it's totally not a relational thing. That is only conversations are relational, but conversation is not something I can talk to. Conversation is the activity of talking. So, yeah, I don't know. That's a kind of a newer one for me. That's kind of speaking to me.
And here I thought I was going to be able to translate your question easily. Yes. I like to make sure that we say everything into the microphone. But Becky's asking about how your concept of yourself, and especially as an outsider, and how that connected and may have changed, especially in middle school, with your connection to God.
Since I was, I do have the, I haven't taken off the microphone, because I didn't quite hit the rebellious stage with that, because I also have a deep need to people please, with some codependency mixed in. And so I couldn't act always on the impulse, because I knew that would disappoint or be unhelpful in the situation. So I had to understand myself in relation to others, because also as being a deep empath, is I wanted to make sure their feelings were either neutral or happy, because I could sense them. And so my sense of self really started to develop much later in life. I was often a chameleon in my younger days, and finally discovering who I was and realizing that's okay, and the people that could see that stayed, and being able to let go of those who wanted more of the chameleon side of me. It really was both freeing and heartbreaking at the same time. And so the sense of self and understanding who God created me to be is, God didn't want me to be a chameleon for everyone else. That's not who God created me to be. And so I had to accept that. And I've also been, like, throughout my life, a collector of people, like, because of the relation, and that because I could see people, I didn't always let them see me, but I could see them, and to have that space for them allowed that reflection to develop and to be seen in that way. I don't know if that fully answers your question, but that's how I heard it.
So I've always seen it like a book, something that's not quite written yet all the way through. Oh, there we go. So I've always seen it like a book. You have your beginning, your middle, and then the part that's not quite written yet. So I also love music. I've played violin for several years prior to not wanting to do it anymore, because I just lost the interest. But I still listen to a lot of classical stuff, even though a lot of it's sampled into newer stuff. So that's the kind of the way I see it, like a song lyric or like a book. So when writing this speech that I gave, I stared at a blank screen for about 4 days. And didn't know where to start. But then I was like, well, let's start at the beginning. And that's kind of how it ended up turning out.
My answer, as you know, you've known me for a long time, the rebellion is still there, right? It didn't go away, right? But what made it a part of who I am and how helped me to develop a self beyond just not what you want me to be, was sort of, I guess, probably at the same time I was I played high school football, and I found my place on the offensive line where you are not an individual. On an offensive line, if you are an individual, you are making a mistake, right? You need to be a unit. And so learning how to listen to a coach, learning how to act as a team, learning how to open up opportunities for the people behind me, learning how, that helped me to recognize that it's not just about rebellion, it's about being the person you need to be. And so in my relationship, therefore, my identity in Christ, my understanding of myself and God, that comes down to choosing your shepherd, right? If we're all going to be sheep, I'm choosing to listen to the voice of the one that I trust, right? So I choose to listen. In high school, I chose to listen to my coach. I choose to listen to God, right? And I choose to be like, okay, well, God's the voice that's guiding me forward, which often comes in the voice of Peggy or the voice of Josh or the voice of one of you out there, right? That it really does. It comes out, that voice of God can come in a lot of different ways. But it's choosing that. As a rebel, I can choose to rebel all the time, or I can choose to follow one shepherd. And so, yeah.
Thank you all. Anybody else have any questions? Yeah, Ron. I also love Sudoku. Okay. We won't be that late, I promise. Okay, so the question is, do you have routines?
Start over there.
The answer is yes. If I get thrown out of my routine, my day is gone. So usually, it's always been like that, though. Like my mom just said, it's been like that since I was little. So, for instance, today, example, I woke up and I have to go get in the shower right away because I get really, really sleep sweat really, really badly. So I just have to get in the shower, clean myself off, get myself ready for the day. It helps me mentally prepare for the day. Just washing yourself does something different for me. And then go continue on with my day. And once that's done, then that's that.
You're going to be super surprised at this. Yes. Yes, I do. I wake up, and the first thing I check my email because I also get a daily devotion there, and it also gets some news in there. I will play solitaire, spider solitaire, free cell, and then I have 2 nano games that I play. And then I go over and I play the Wordle. And then I have 2 other online games that I play of guessing movie posters and movies based off of screenshots. And then I go back and do the connections and tiles. And then I go over to my Snapchat and watch the Hooked story. Like I have a few saved stories that come up. So I watch those, whatever they're called, where they're what? No, not the memories. They're like the subscriptions that I've subscribed to. And depending on there is, do I have more time or not to play Sudoku? And then I have a set routine of how I get ready to get out the door. And so I build this all into before I even leave to do anything. And then I have semi-structure because that's where it starts to break down because do you guys ever forget to eat? I don't eat 90% of lunch. And when I remember to do it, it's like because I'm hungry, like starving, and then I eat at my desk, which is totally horrible, but it's just how I function. And so like there's a certain point where I have the super, super strict structure, and then it's like, meh, let's see where today goes. I used to be a server at a restaurant, and so that was glorious because you had your set structure, and then it was, let's see what we get at our tables. So so yes, and then no.
No. No. So I don't have a structure. I don't have routine. But I have 9 kids. So there is a huge amount of structure around me that I dance around in, right? That I find my place in this moment, that moment, and I do my part. I help out. I do what I can. Everything you guys just said about I start off with this and this and this and this. Oh my gosh, that would drive my brain nuts. If I did the same thing every day, I couldn't. No, I don't have that. But I have 9 kids, so I don't have that. Yeah. Brenda is a huge amount of structure around me. My wife is the epitome of structure, and she does a great job of structuring the world around me, and then I just dance around in it and do what I want.
Which is why this event this last weekend worked really, really well, because I was all structure, and then I'd look at Paul and say, go. And he was able to do the other stuff, and it was a great balance.
Sometimes literally dancing. To be fair, as he referenced his wife Brenda normally explains this exact process where she is the scheduler for Paul. If you go up to Paul in any situation and you say, can you do this on this date? No. Text Brenda, call Brenda. We have learned this in those interactions. All right.
One of the reasons I struggle with structure, I do not have a calendar in my head. I do not have, like when you say miss a meal, I do not have any idea what time it is right now. When you said 9 o'clock, it could have been 10 o'clock. I have no idea what time it is, right? Like, and my kids make fun of me all the time for not having the slightest clue what time it is, because I'll, 3 hours after lunch, and like, are we going to eat lunch today? Like, oops, sorry, So I don't have that, so structure is really hard for me because I don't have those skills.
Which is, all of this is really common. All of these stories are ways that I know others who are neurodivergent also interact with the world. The ADHD and not eating is one of the most constant stories I know about those who have ADHD. Either forgetting to eat or not being hungry or just being so excited about what they're doing that they forget a meal. Okay. Yes. Being so focused on the thing at hand before we get to eating. All right. Any other questions? All right. Anything else that you all would like to share?
So many people in my life are on the autism spectrum, or we do a camp for people with special needs, and so a lot of my friends don't experience worship, don't experience church life, don't experience God stuff. That's how I always talk to them about it. Like, you experience God stuff differently than I do. You experience God stuff differently than others do. That's not bad, right? And so I just thank you guys for having the proactive reality of, hey, let's get some ideas out there, let's get some thoughts out there, let's get some discussion out there so that the world can be more welcoming and more inclusive. So, thank you.
Yeah. That's a great question. How, especially as an adult woman who was not diagnosed or in any way kind of connected with ADHD when you were younger, how did you learn to understand that it was ADHD and not just really good organizational skills?
Yes, and I used to tell myself I was a really good multitasker. The difference is the way that it is executed per se. So I have multiple tabs open on my computer screen of different projects I am working on. with the purpose of being able to know it was there. But the first 4 are always the same, the 2 email accounts, Facebook and Pandora, because that's music. I always have music playing. And like the Bejeweled Blitz, I used to call it multitasking. And my therapist said, but are you actually multitasking? Because where are you giving your attention? And realizing that that is actually how I was coping with ADHD. And so I actually start to wonder if many of us who have become really good multitaskers actually fall somewhere on the spectrum of ADHD, and this is part of how we've learned to cope with it. Because if there is not enough for me to do, I actually am very unproductive. I need a little bit of the stress, I need a little bit of the deadline. You stared at your computer screen for 4 hours. I knew this was coming. 4 days, I'm sorry. I write sermons every week. My DS isn't here, so we're good. I write them Sunday morning. I literally get to church super early, and I put it into a bullet point, very similar today. I struggled at my office to write tonight, so I had a guideline until I was like, if I don't leave in a half hour, I am not going to get there in time. I need to finish this, and I need that extra push. All while my secretary came in and was asking me questions and some of that. So my multitasking, actually, ADHD allows me to be interrupted easier, but there's also moments when I shut the door and I said, I can't let you disturb me, because if you break this train of thought, it's never going to get back on its tracks. And so there's that both and so I think it's a yes. Is it multitasking? Or is it ADHD? And the answer is yes. I sometimes can't tell the difference, but I can tell when it's more hyperactive because I'm more bouncy.
I think if I had a chance to answer it, if I was trying to answer that question, I think if you're in the midst of something and the distractions or the multitasks go away and you can't function anymore, right? It's probably ADHD. Right, I actively did crossword puzzles during lectures in college and seminary, right, so that I could focus on 2 things rather than 12, right? So I could focus on the crossword puzzle and what the professor was saying, right? Because if I tried to not focus on this crossword puzzle, now I have a song lyrics, a movie, the last conversation I had with my friend, whatever, all going through my head at the same time, and what that guy's saying is just a mess of what's going on in my head, right? But if I focus on something, if I take that, put that energy and that attention towards one thing, now I can focus on 2 things. So that would be my say. Like if your multitasking went away, could you still function? That would be the answer I would have for you.
So I have 4 screens when I go to a workplace. As you can tell, I'm not a pastor. So I have more than one screen that I have 60 different tasks to do on. They're all open at the same time. I am able to usually work in order because of my linear thinking. So if I complete one task, okay, then I have these 3 tasks that have to be completed before that task is done. And then it just kind of goes throughout the day. Music helps me focus that, and a lot of the times it's energy and it's loud to the point that I drown everything else out, and it helps me focus.
And Josh does not have ADHD. So just to kind of clarify that one of the interesting things, Dixie, to your point, is that a lot of research, one of the reasons women weren't being diagnosed when we were younger was because in young girls, and this is a generalization and a stereotype, in young boys, the typical ADHD is bouncing off the walls and can't stop moving. In young girls, what that would show forth as is actually chatting and having conversation constantly. So for women who were getting in trouble in grade school for talking the whole time, instead of doing their work, it was a very similar experience to their male counterparts who were kicking the chair the whole time. And so their teacher noticed the kicking the chair, saw that, and might have said something where girls were just told to be quiet, or that they were ditzy or that kind of thing. So that's kind of the story that's coming out of a lot of the 80s and 90s as ADHD became more a part of our world and our understanding of it. It got focused on those hyperactive boys in that way.
If your multitasks are a series of unfinished tasks, then you probably have ADHD too.
Also, if you grab the microphone 4 times in a row to tell me another statement, it might be ADHD. It is, exactly. Any other questions? I do want to say a special thank you. This last year at annual conference, for those of you who might not be United Methodist, this is just a meeting we have every year. Our kind of bosses or our group gathered and actually awarded our church a award, Justice Award, for our work with neurodiversity, and the funds that came with that award are how tonight is happening. So I wanted to mention that and thank them for that as well. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. All right, I think that is the last of our questions. Thank you all for being here. In your little booklet, there is a piece of paper that comes out. It has kind of feedback, or if you'd like to sign up for anything or know more about anything else, if you could leave that on the table as you head out, we would love, or the QR code in the corner, there's a digital version of it. And for anyone joining us online, there's a digital version linked in the description of the video. All right, thank you all, and have a wonderful night. Thank you, 3.